I am Joyce Harper and I'm Professor of Reproductive Science at University College London in the Institute for Women's Health. And I have a book coming out very soon called Your Fertile Years. And in this short video, I'm going to summarise chapter 4, which is all about sex, everything you wanted to know about sex. My book is published by Sheldon Press and is available to pre-order now on Amazon. So everything you want to know about sex. Well, this is a topic that unfortunately is very taboo, and it's really rare for people to talk openly about sex. And I think this is something that we really need to change. And with dating apps such as Tinder and Grindr around now, it's much easier to meet a partner to have sex with on a very casual basis and even a one-off. And this is much easier than it would have been about 20 years ago before these apps. So I think probably there's a lot more people having sex with a lot of different partners, but it's still something that we really don't talk about and we don't really get educated properly about. So in this video, I'm only going to talk about 4 parts of the book, and I've also written a blog about this on Global Women Connected, but I have written a lot more in the book about sex. I'm not going to read this list out, but being a virgin, masturbation, sexual problems, FGM, prostitution, all of these things I have covered in this chapter of my book. So the 4 things I'm going to concentrate on in this video, and also the blog I've written on Global Women Connected, is about sex education, how we have sex for fun, the female orgasm, and how to have sex to become pregnant. And I have made a video as part of our International Fertility Education Initiative, where we had made a poster about fertility education in 2019. And I've now made a video about this, which is on YouTube. So sex education. Well, many years ago, I wrote a guide for parents to help give them the words and the confidence to talk to their children about sex education. But unfortunately, I think parents talking to their children is becoming even less now than it ever was. People are relying on schools to teach their children about sex, and children will then talk to each other. As I said, parents, I think, is probably low on the list. And I always recommend people to watch Sex Education. I think it's a great drama, which provides some really interesting in-depth analysis of certain issues around sex. And I just wish that we'd open this up even more. Children and adults are going to learn a lot on social media. They're going to learn some correct things and some incorrect things. Obviously, we also have the issue about pornography, which I go into in my book chapter, but I won't talk about now. And as grown-ups, I think we rely more on TV documentaries, what we read in magazines and hear on the radio, etc., and talking to friends. But I think the go-to place for adults is going to be good old Google to find out about any questions we might have about sex. So I think we obviously need to change this. In the UK, the Department for Education have updated the sex education curriculum, and now it is mandatory for schools to provide this, and they are going to audit how schools do this. So I think that's going to change in the UK, but it's not there yet. It's amazing that in 2021 it's not there. But I think in other countries, there's even less of a situation. I know that some countries, the children don't learn any sex education at all, or if they do learn any, they'll learn some very basics at younger ages. And I've been quoted in the press saying that I think we should start sex education when children are toddlers, which is actually not quite correct. I do think that we should use the correct terms for our genitals and reproductive organs when children ask. So I think we need to have sex education in an age-appropriate time. And I don't think it should be one conversation when a child is going through puberty or hopefully before puberty. I think we should have this dialogue throughout a child's life, both at school and with their parents. And what worries me, if parents don't engage with these conversations at all, is that if their child is having any issues around sex, then who are they going to talk to about it? They just talk to their friends. It's unlikely they'll talk to a teacher. And I really hope that they can come and talk to their parents. But if this hasn't been an ongoing dialogue and it's been a bit of an embarrassed conversation, one-off conversation, then it may be those children are not likely to go to their parents to discuss this. So how do we have sex for fun? Well, again, education is really important. And unfortunately, in sex education, we normally are just teaching children how to have sex not to get pregnant and how not to get a sexually transmitted infection. So it's quite a negative view. And I think having sex for fun and teaching children how to have sex for fun is really important. But consent is hugely important. We've got to teach children about consent. And if you haven't seen it, there's this great animation called Consent. It's simple as tea, where there's a great conversation around pressurizing people to have sex or a cup of tea, as they're using as the analogy, when they're not wanting it, or when they're not in a fit state to consent. So unfortunately now with adolescents drinking and taking social recreational drugs, there may be a situation where consent becomes very, very blurred. And if someone's very drunk, they cannot consent. It's not possible for them to do that. Now, if you see a sex scene on TV, it normally lasts about a minute at the most. It's very quick, and it's normally just vaginal sex. So they'll normally often put the guy will put the girl up against a wall or something, have intercourse, and that's it, a very short thing. Well, vaginal sex actually does only normally last for between 5 and 7 minutes. So it's not normally hugely much longer than that. But I think it's really important when we are learning about sex for fun that there's all these other areas of our body that love being stimulated. Our erogenous zones are everywhere. So we've got breasts, buttocks, neck, lips, ears, toes. I'm not toe for me, but everyone's got their own thing. And I think what's really important is that what any two people like when they're having sex could be very, very different. And 2 or 3 people, however many people are having sex, have got to try and understand what the other person wants. And we've all got to have our boundaries. So going back to consent, if someone consents for sex, it doesn't mean that they've consented for every type of sex. So for example, anal sex might not be on their agenda. So just because they've accepted vaginal sex doesn't mean they'll accept anal sex. So these are complicated things, but they need to be discussed for sure. So I think foreplay is really, really important. Clitoral stimulation, fingering, man and woman, playing with the scrotum and penis, oral sex, sex toys are really, in my view, a fundamental part of sex. So we've never been taught about these things, so how are we supposed to know? But hopefully we will have a very positive view of this. And I just say one thing about pornography is that it can give a very negative view and a very violent view of sex. And I think it's important for young people, especially who are now watching this so easily, that they understand that what they see in pornography is not normal sex. And having sex for fun should be a really great positive experience. Which leads me nicely into the female orgasm. So for 80% of women, they do not have an orgasm from vaginal penetrative sex. They need more than just intercourse to do that. They need stimulation of the clitoris, either manually or orally. And I absolutely love this picture of the clitoris. And I put the link to where I got this from on the blog on Global Women. The clitoris is not just the little bud that we know that's at the top of our vulva. And I always say, when people say, well, where exactly is the clitoris? Well, it's the anatomical part of the woman that's relevant to the penis. So really it's where a penis would be in a guy. So the clitoris is, but it's not just that. If you look at this diagram here, it's all of these wings or areas here that go right through the woman's labia. So that whole area of her vulva will be really, really sensitive, with 8,000 nerve endings in our clitoral region. So 90% of women masturbate. There hasn't been a lot of studies, but those that have shown a good number. And 2/3 of those that masturbate do so up to 3 times a week. And women may masturbate in lots of different ways by stimulating their clitoris and or their vagina, sex toys, just their hands, whatever. But women do masturbate, and it's important. And the female orgasm is a wonderful thing We can have multiple orgasms, etc., but I go into this much more in my book. And then how to have sex to get pregnant. Well, I discussed this a lot when I went through chapter 1 of my book. And chapter 1 explains about ovulation, which is when the egg is released from the ovary. And that egg is, on the day of ovulation, is only viable for about 24 hours. So we are most fertile around the time of ovulation. And we're also fertile for the 5 days before ovulation, because sperm can live for up to 5 days, even some studies suggesting a little bit longer than 5 days, in the female genital tract. So if the woman ovulates on day 17 and you have intercourse on, say, day 12, then she could still get pregnant. So there have been ways of monitoring whether a woman is ovulating. I've said this many times, but looking at your menstrual cycle dates is highly inaccurate. Looking at basal body temperature, which can be measured before you get out of bed in the morning, looking at cervical mucus, looking at all of these things together, or a very simple way, just using an ovulation stick, will help a woman know when she's ovulating. But just measuring these will tell her when she's ovulating, but it will not tell anything about the quantity or quality of the egg that's released. So hopefully she'll release one egg, but it may not be of a good quality. Now, there are apps to help you monitor these things, and we have done a study here on looking at fertility apps. Half the fertility apps only look at menstrual cycle dates, which don't mean anything. You have to measure one of these markers of ovulation. And unfortunately, there's lots of period trackers or menstrual cycle trackers that tell you the day you ovulate. And we've got some research that will be coming out on this soon. But this is highly inaccurate data. So please don't rely on your dates. If you're trying to get pregnant, you need to monitor your temperature, your cervical mucus, or use an ovulation stick to find out when you are ovulating. And if you're under 35 years old, the woman, and you've been trying for 1 year to get pregnant, and you think you've been doing it at the right time, every 2 to 3 days around the time of ovulation, and you haven't got pregnant, then it's time to see a health professional if you have worries about it. And for women over 35, we would normally say just 6 months. Try for 6 months. And if you've had no success, then you may want to go and see a health professional about your fertility. So that's everything you should know about sex. There's a little bit more written about this in the blog you'll find on globalwomenconnected.com, and obviously a huge amount more in my book. Thank you very much.